Now, one related model is not enough though. We now added this one-to-many location relation, but now I also want to add participants that can sign up for our meetups. Because that's some functionality which we will later add to our front end, to the user-facing part of this website. There, if we are on this detail page, where we should also display this image, now that I look at it, there I later want to display some form here, which allows us to sign up with our email address. And then we should be stored in the database as a participant if we do that. And therefore, we need a model for this. Hence here, I'll add another class in the models.py file, and I'll name it participant. Name, of course, is up to you, but you need to inherit from models.model. And now we can define how a participant record should look like in the database. And here I'll keep it fairly simple. I just want to have an email being stored. And for that, we can actually use the char field, or even better, the email field. The email field comes with some extra validation that ensures that we really store an email address in there and not some random text. I'll also set this to unique true to ensure that we can't add multiple records with the same email address here. And I'll also add the str method here to make sure that we actually return the email address as a string representation if that model instance or if a model instance is needed in string form, for example, for the admin dashboard. Now we got this model added here, but now the idea is to again create a connection to our meetup here. And for that, I'll first of all delete that meetup which we deleted before, which we created before, because we're going to change it again. And now here I want to set up a many-to-many relation. Many-to-many because one meetup can have multiple participants, and one participant can sign up for multiple meetups. You can use the same email address to sign up for different meetups. Therefore, I'll add a participants key here to my meetup class. But now it's not models foreign key, which we would use for a one-to-many relation, but instead it's the many-to-many field, which we use for a, guess what, many-to-many relation. And here we now again point at the related model, participant, and we only need to do this in one of the two models. We could do it in both. I could add a meetups key here in participant and point at meetup, at least theoretically, but practically I can't because, I have a cyclical dependency. Meetup is defined after I try to use it, and it's also not required. I could define it here and not there if I switch the order, but defining it in one of the two models is enough. Now here, I want to make sure though that you don't have to have participants, that this field can be empty. And by the way, technically, it's now not a field or a column in the database table where related record IDs are stored, but instead behind the scenes, Django will create an extra table, a matching table between these two models, you could say, where one row is added per relation. Because it's a many-to-many relation, you can have multiple IDs stored here for this relation in both models. That would not work, hence we have a separate table in between. But I want to make sure that we don't need to have any related records at all, because initially a meetup has no participants and that's fine. And we do this by adding the blank keyword argument here to the many-to-many field and setting this to true. You can add that to any model field, by the way. If it's allowed to be empty, you can allow this by adding blank true. This will ensure that if a new entry is added through the admin dashboard, for example, the input field there in the form, which is presented by that dashboard, may be empty. Now, this blank option here really only configures whether a value must be provided through the form that is being used for creating a new record, for example, on the admin dashboard, or not. And if we set blank to true as we do it here, then we say that we don't need to provide a related record when creating a new meetup. Now, we also can add null equals true as an additional option. And I will say right away, for the many-to-many field, this actually won't have an effect. We can add it, but it won't have an effect. But for other fields, it will have an effect. The blank config defines, as I mentioned, whether the field in the form may be empty. With null equal to true, we tell Django that in the database table which it creates, for this field, we can have a null entry, which is a special database value in SQL databases. So if no value is provided, because blank values are allowed, null would be stored as a value in the database. And therefore you often set both, that you are fine with not getting a value, and that in such a case, this special null value would be stored. Now in case of the many-to-many field, it's not important. Null equals true doesn't have any effect there, because as I mentioned before, the related data is not stored in a database column anyways. Instead, we have a in-between table between the related tables, and therefore if we don't add a relation, no record is created in that in-between table. That's all. So nothing is added there, and therefore no special null value or anything like that is added. Simply nothing is added in this case. With this many-to-many relation added, we now again need to do what? Yes, run our migrations again, because we added a brand new model and edited an existing one. So again, we can run python manage py make migrations. We need to do this whenever we change something about our models. And then we run migrate. Now, in case you wonder why this time it did not get this prompt to provide a default value, the reason is that I allowed this field to be empty. And with that setting being in place, Django, of course, has no problem to add possibly existing previous records, because it is able to just not have any related records for existing records. That's fine with those settings, and that's why we did not get this prompt here. Now with that, we can again run our server, of course. And now if I reload, I don't see participants here in the admin area. And the reason for that is that I did not register participants here in the admin py file. Now, we could absolutely do that if you want to manage participants through that interface. And I do want to do that also because I want to see which participants we have in our database in general. And therefore, I'll import participant here from models in the admin py file, and then simply register participant here. And again, we could configure it if we want to, but I'll leave it like this. And now we have our participants, of course, none at the moment. And those will also not primarily be managed through this admin interface, but instead through this user-facing frontend in the future once we added this form. But now let's add a new meetup again. First meetup again. First meetup. Choose the file which I prepared. Choose a location. We could add some default participants, but we don't have to. And save that. And I'll add a second meetup as well. Or actually, I won't do that right now. But if I now go back to the starting page here, like this, then I again see my meetup here. So that is working. And now, before we work on that form to allow users to sign up, I just want to quickly also make sure that the image shows up on this detail page, and I want to tweak my models one last time, because the meetup model should not just have the fields which it currently has, but it should also have an organizer email and a date when it takes place. Feel free to try that on your own. We'll do it together as a next step.